Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. And this is our next session for the First Responders Wellbeing Summit of 2021 that's brought to you by Wellbeing Australia. So before we go into talking with our panel, just wanted to share with you a little bit about who Wellbeing Australia is and what's brought us here today. So Wellbeing Australia is a not-for-profit. We're completely here for our community. We're membership based, so we're not connected to any government, any agencies, any one organisation. And we're very much here for our members. So this summit has come over many years of discussion where we've been delivering to community, and we've had an outpouring of people asking for us to really dedicate a bit of focus back to first responders and to their families and to their community generally. So I'll talk more about how that sort of fits with our session today in a moment. As an organisation, we have national focus. We do look at everybody globally as well, but we have a very national focus in terms of who we are. And this summit itself fits directly with our key message of being a positive, proactive, solution-focused organisation. So this is not a forum today to look at governance or agency or funding. We are here for you, for first responders, in a broad perspective of all of those people wearing uniforms, those people that are volunteers, families and friends of first responders, and those people that find themselves in the line of response completely by accident. And certainly over the last few years, that's something we've noticed is happening more and more. So our goal is to be able to speak with you more about how this can help you focus on your well-being so that you can live your best life. Now, our themes for our summit are about living well. And when we're speaking about living well, there's a few things we're focused on. We're focused on what living well looks like for you, and that's through connection with yourself and with others. It's in living with hope, and it's in engaging with your community. So today's session is quite an exciting one because we're looking at really unpacking that word well-being that we speak about so often, but mostly from that context of what is well-being for our first responders and how does that impact. So please, as we're speaking, remember, you are possibly a first responder yourself when you wear uniform. You may be someone who's married to or family or friends with a first responder. You may have been a responder in the past and you're now retired, or you may be someone who is just involved in a number of different areas and find yourself in that space. So that's where we're really coming from for today. So I'm very pleased to welcome our panelists for today who are here to share their stories. So it's quite exciting because these are two lovely commissioners giving their time, but also giving it their vulnerability and their honesty of what's happened to them and what sort of made them who they are. So please help me in welcoming Andrew Crisp and Georgeina Whelan. So Andrew, just maybe to kick us off, can you share a little bit about sort of what you see as well-being? What does that mean to you? But what have you noticed on your own journey through this time? Oh, you're on mute, Andrew. I'll just get you on mute.
It had to happen, didn't it? I have to be the very first one. So, thank you. Can I actually, though, just begin by acknowledging traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting this evening and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and noting that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I do apologise if anyone can pick up a sound in the background. They're doing some work. Can you...
Timing, isn't it? Don't be worried. It's okay. We can hear you loud and clear.
All right, I'll speak up. But look, it's interesting as I thought about preparing for what is, for me, a really, really important to share some of my experiences. I was a police officer for 40 years and I've been in this role for 2.5 years. And when it comes to well-being, I guess, hard for me to define. I guess for me, it's about, I know when I'm going well. I know when I'm humming. I know when my brain is working well. I'm making good decisions, and that things are working. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably not in that place at this particular point in time. You know, moving from the 1925s into COVID, and I know I'm tired. I know I'm really, really tired. So I'm not. In terms of my own well-being, I'm doing better than I was 6 months ago, but I'm not firing on all cylinders. So I guess for me, it's about understanding exactly when you are working well, when you're working effectively, and when you're not. And I'm sure we'll get into the conversation around that. But just to open up at the moment, my well-being's okay. I probably give myself about a 6 out of 10, but got some way to go. Looking forward to some holidays to help with that.
And that's the reality of it, isn't it? I actually think that's an important thing, and that's our message from Wellbeing Australia, is that 6 out of 10 is where we are today. And totally agree that the impacts over the last number of years have sort of caught up with us, and it is something we are hearing from attendees and those that are reaching out to us joining the conference is, I'm actually exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted. I'm physically exhausted. I can't keep going like this. So thank you for your honesty, because I think that's a really key point for us to know where we're at. And that's exactly what we're wanting to talk about in this session. So Georgeina, maybe you can add where you sort of see wellbeing and what it has been that's brought you to where you are today.
Oh, absolutely. And good evening, everybody. Look, I've got to say that I'm not far off Andrew's personal assessment in terms of well-being. I probably sit about a 6 or a 7. And I say that, or share my assessment of where I sit, because, you know, it is a scale, and I've been at the worst end of the scale, really being a 1 or a 2 and struggling, and I've been at the high end of the scale. And as a consequence of that, I really think what well-being means to me is 3 words: control, choice, and freedom. I say control, not because I'm a control freak, although some people might say that I am, is because when I was at my worst, when I was not tracking well, I actually had felt like I'd lost control of who I was, decisions that I was making, and most importantly, where my future was, or what I was even going to be doing the next day. When I am well and I am tracking well, I feel that I've got a nice balance and equilibrium. So in fact, I can loosen the reins and I don't need to be as in control or fight for it. And I say choices and freedom to have a choice, because when you are well, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the world's your oyster, and you have choice and you have balance, and you can be the best that you want to be, whether it be as a first responder, as a partner of a first responder, and as a member of our community. I spent 35 years in the Army before I came into the Emergency Services Agency, and I've been married for 29 years to a fabulous individual who was a firefighter for 20 years of his life and the father of my 4 children. So being well, both as an individual myself, as a partner, as a parent, and as part of a partnership, allows you then to have that freedom and the choices to, but I hate to use this term, but it's such an important one, live your best life.
And isn't it interesting that that control and freedom go hand in hand? That if we're not taking control, that freedom actually, it slips away from us. And it's interesting you mentioned your partner has also been in first response, because that's something we hear really regularly. And that seems to be something that becomes a big impact because of the juggling and the additional things we're doing. So what do you think? I mean, you've both sort of said at the moment, you're being really honest, and thank you to say it's been a tough time, and you're not alone there. So what is it that's impacting your wellbeing? What do you think is giving you that drain? Maybe Andrew, do you want to start us off? You're on mute again, Andrew. You're tricking me.
I had to sort of stop. I was ready to go. I'm so used to chairing things, and I'm always got the mic on. But I think it is that cumulative effect. And again, you know, I like to talk about the bucket, and how full is the bucket. And again, that has fluctuated over the last probably 12 or 14 months. And I guess, Georgeina talked about sort of getting to that, that rock bottom. And I guess for me, that did happen late last year. I guess, we're well into COVID. Putting it bluntly, I was being attacked in the media, and at the same time, so I was coping with that. As we know, sometimes it's the impact on our families. So my mum would contact me and go, I'm hearing that you're resigning, and it's really tough. So you have to absorb all that as well. But one of our daughters had a miscarriage at that time, and and my bucket was full. And a very, a close colleague, a secretary of one of our departments, happened to ring me just after I'd got the news. And she did that, how are you feeling? Because we've been checking in on each other. And I just had to open up, and I was just a mess. I was crying, and I was just a real mess. And so, I had to go home that day. I took a week to spend time with my family, which was absolutely the right thing to do. I sort of think, I can push through this, but I knew it was the wrong thing to do, and I just had to step away. And I guess that's what we tend to think at times, that not that we're irreplaceable, but we have to stay there and stay on the deck and sort of make sure the ship is heading in the right direction. But great people jumped in around behind me and just did a fantastic job, and it gave me that I needed that week, 8 days to get myself back into such a position that I could continue my role. But it is that cumulative effect. So I'm worn out, whether that's been professionally or because of the personal situation.
And as you said, I think I love your language that, I was a mess, because that's exactly how we feel, isn't it? We feel it inside before we're prepared to bring it out. What made you feel safe to have that conversation? What made you feel safe? Or was it just purely timing that you were prepared to say something?
It was just timing, just because I just got that news, and I just thought, she's a good person, and I just felt comfortable to open up with her, because we've developed a really strong relationship over the last 12 months. Maybe if it was someone else, I probably wouldn't have. It was the right person at the right time, which was so important, and for me and for my family, for me to be there to spend time with them, because Georgeina you've touched on it, that I've been very fortunate to have a very supportive family. Married 39 years this year, and and I've, in some respects, I've been able to do everything that I want to do. And, I try and always give back, but this was a time I had to well and truly give back.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've just got one more question for you, Andrew, but before I do, just for those people that have dialed in, if you can pop any questions into the Q&A function, that will keep it anonymous for you. So Andrew and Georgeina are here for you. Please share any questions you have. The Q&A function remains anonymous while the chat is visible to other people. So just to clarify that, I forgot to tell you before. Andrew, you mentioned the bucket. You say you talk about bucket. Can you just, for those of us that aren't familiar with what you're talking about, can you explain that before Georgeina shares?
Well, I guess it's that the discussion earlier about, if you think about a bucket and your well-being, and where you've got that capacity to do so much more. So, I'd like to think that, generally, I've got 75% capacity. So, I'm running at 25% in that bucket. But, as things start to happen and pressure gets applied, the bucket gets, fuller and fuller. And my bucket was full. And that bit of news was the bit that, caused it to flow over the edge.
Yeah. So it's full of those things that we're just like trying to push past and deal with, and those negatives and those just things coming from different spaces. And I do respect you guys, because you're in the media. That's an external impact we can't control, right? And that does happen for people in different spaces and different places, and even for families who get drawn into different things. When the fires were on, that was something we saw a lot of people being, pushed into reporting and different things like that, which can be uncomfortable as well. Georgeina, what about for you? What is it that impacts you in that wellbeing space? What fills your bucket with those problems?
Yeah, look, I think back to when I was at an all-time low. It was actually 2015, and I was still in the army at that stage, and it was a pretty tough job that I was in. I was under a lot of pressure to deliver and perform, and both my parents died that year, and I was extremely close to both my mother and my father. In fact, if it wasn't for them helping my husband and I raise our 4 children, I certainly wouldn't be in the career that I am today. And I really hit rock bottom because I did not put my hand up and ask for help. I took it all on myself. I was internalizing everything. And I started having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I thought I was having a heart attack. Ended up in the emergency department at the Canberra hospital. And I remember giving my husband instructions as to where my will was in the filing cabinet at home. Like I really scared myself. Anyway, I'd lost control completely. And it was a colleague of mine who was also a very good mental health professional said, if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable and share and seek for help, you're not going to recover from this. And so I did. I put my hand up and I went into some therapy, and which helped me sort of see the forest from the trees. And then I really went onto this road of, I literally call it recovery, because it was. And I found the person I had lost over about the period 2013 to 2015. And I think it was because I had been through that really tough period that, you know, man, 2020 was tough for all of us. And I was only a brand new commissioner. I'd been appointed in the October of 19. I had had a great 2.5 years as the chief of the State Emergency Service here in the ACT, had a really fabulous work-life balance. Everything was going really well. And I was very excited to be appointed as the commissioner. And then those fires hit. And, you know, in my first year, we lost 80% of the Namadgi National Park. And we lost that park on my watch. And I felt incredibly responsible for what had occurred. And again, we are in the spotlight. You know, everybody from a paramedic, you know, the first policeman on scene, firefighters. It doesn't really matter whether you're the most junior first responder to a commissioner. We are all exposed to the media these days, and we all feel that pressure. And if it's not the media, it's social media of people videoing us and sharing it. And so I was really sort of feeling that pressure. And it was actually, I had to sort of take stock of myself and say, right, this is what happened last time. You can start to see the early signs here. You're feeling a bit stressed. You're not sleeping well. You know, you're speaking at 100 miles an hour. What's going on? And I took a step back, and like Andrew, I reached out and was able to, I think part of my challenge was I was angry, and I didn't know whether I was angry with myself because I should have done a better job, or I was angry with what people were saying was a better job. But you internalize it all, and you, as first responders, we take on a hell of a lot of responsibility. We can't help ourselves. And so I was able to then put in place some of the sort of the techniques I had acquired back in 2015 and apply those. And then, of course, like Andrew, I also took some away time, and it was only a short period of time, but it was a circuit breaker for me as well. I had fallen down the stairs just before Black Summer and broken my nose. So I took 2 weeks off to go in a hospital and have my nose straightened. And I've got to tell you though, just that breakaway, and maybe it was the painkillers they gave me as well, but you know, it just gave me enough to regroup and refresh myself and then get myself back into it.
Such a shame you had to get to that to get the break though, right?
I know.
We don't want to have to break our nose to get the break, and it's a very nice nose, so they did well, but we don't want to have to get to that to have to do it, right?
My husband tells me though it's great because I'm not snoring anymore, so he's getting a good night's sleep.
Bonus. And it's really interesting to hear both of you, because quite often what we notice is people who go into roles where they're giving back to the community, supporting the community, whether they're the volunteers, whether they're people that are parts of families that are incredibly generous in their community, whether they are formal first responders wearing uniforms, they tend to be really giving by nature. And so that's not something you separate at home versus at work, and you can't differentiate that. So it makes sense with what you guys are saying, that it accumulates and it's that touch point. And I love for Georgeina, for you to be able to say, someone made contact with you and said, hey, things aren't okay, and you're able to have that conversation, whereas yep. Andrew, you were able to have that right person on the call at that time. And I think sometimes we've got to try and see through that, you know, that we're bogged down in, to look for those windows. So something we talk a lot about at Wellbeing Australia, and it's a big differentiator for us compared to others, is our focus is going, life has ups, life has downs. We want you to have more ups, definitely. But the reality is we all live a life where we see things and we all experience things. And I know in our conversations around this summit, there's been people who've been involved in surf lifesaving, just kids who are helping out, and they've seen things that they genuinely would never have expected, through to adults who have had a lifetime of this. So how do we proactively manage our wellbeing as much as possible? How do we live our lives to proactively look for those those moments you're both talking about, those windows of, hang on, I'm going down a path here, or I need to regroup through. So Georgeina, do you want to talk, because you were just mentioning that, seeing those and implementing those strategies? What were those strategies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, I call it my bank, and you know, my resilience bank, and what I bank into it so that I know how to withdraw when I need it. But for me, the strategies are really simple ones. Make sure you get out for a walk 2 or 3, 4 days a week. And even if it's only for half an hour, you know, a bit of fresh air, put the music on, you know, listen to your favorite podcast, just disconnect from the rest of the world for a while so you can just daydream and have some, what did a colleague used to call it? He used to call it his alone time. I also meditate. There are so many apps out there that are free that you can download. I started off using the DBA 10-minute app. It was just a breathing app that really allowed me to just have a bit of a circuit breaker. There's now a whole bunch of meditation apps that you can use on YouTube. They're free, or there's programs you can buy for about $9 a month. But I have found that I use a sleep meditation one in the evening if I've had a really busy day and I just can't quite switch off. And the key to success for me is that I fall asleep before the sequence is finished, which is really good. And then I wake up and the earphones are somewhere and my husband's pushing something out of his face. But little things like that. I've also been a really solid build girl my entire life. And so what I realized was I just had to be really mindful of my health and well-being. So trying to eat well and being conscious of, you know, healthy heart and just, you know, making sure that particularly when you go on ops, you know, most of us ran a 3-month campaign over summer, and you just get so used to all that great catered food that comes in, or the lolly basket someone sends you, is just making sure you remind yourself to pick up a piece of fruit rather than the bar of chocolate. But just little things like that, and then making sure that you do that as much as often as you can throughout the year. Then you're able to bank some of that so that when you are under stress, your body can then draw on those resources, whether it be the fact that you're not tired before you start a demanding operational period, or that even though you are tired, you can switch off and get at least 4 or 5 hours sleep during a busy operation. And as I said, making sure even little things like just reminding ourselves to drink water and just keeping ourselves as fresh as we can.
Funny because you said simple things, and they're things that we just, when we go on autopilot, we forget, right? We're busy, so we grab that food that's there. We're pushing through because that's just the nature of the work, but the quality of the sleep's dropping. Yeah. Did you have times where you had to sort of bumble through and test out different things? I mean, you talk about a lot of apps and things that are working for you now. Did you have to experiment to work out what worked?
Oh, I did. You know, I had to train myself. And I remember I was seeing a counsellor for about 12 months back in 2015. And she said to me, your mental health is actually just the same as being an elite athlete. And of course, I just laughed at her. But then she said you have to train for it, so that just as you train as a first responder to automatically respond, whether you're a policeman, a paramedic, or a firefighter, you've got to train your mind to be able to react and buffer. And so I did. I actually initially thought, oh, this won't be hard, but it is. The hardest part is setting aside the time to do it and realizing and accepting that you're not wasting 15 minutes or you're not wasting 30 minutes. It's actually an investment in yourself. And so I tried a whole bunch of different things, but what I was open to trying a whole bunch of things. And then I find it's a bit like, as my husband says, I'm a mad shopper I've got 3 daughters. He said, you know how you try on 15 things before you find the one that you like? Well, pretty much training yourself to be open to mindfulness, open to meditation, open to walking, or just reading a good book. Train and practice, and you fall off the horse and you get back on. So.
Very true, though, isn't it? That we have to treat it as if it's a broken limb. It's that then we wouldn't be questioning physio and rebuilding muscles and changing what we're doing and adapting. But because we can't see it, we don't necessarily work with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we very rarely, we live in such a busy, busy world. We're on 24/7. We're not at work, we're on our iPhones. If we're not on our iPhones, we're on social media, or we're, and we beat ourselves up for taking 30 minutes time out, because we're not doing something, it's wasteful. And I just think, wow, how did we get there? That we're on all the time.
That's right. And that 5 to 10 minute, 15-minute window, like you talk about, that's so attainable. Whereas if I know things have happened in my world where people say, do a half-hour meditation here or there, and half an hour seems so much to take out of your day, but 5 and 10 minutes to trial things, we really don't have an excuse for that. We can fit that in, kind of thing. So what about you, Andrew? What's become that toolkit for you?
Yeah, thanks. I love listening to Georgeina. She's got me. I need to be more focused around mindfulness. I need to train myself. I've tried various things, but I've never really persevered. But yeah, I've made another note. So and it's interesting, just that last little bit of a conversation about guilt. And I'm finding that really interesting, particularly at the moment. A lot of people will start early, and some will be going at sort of mid-afternoon, but they've already done 8 or 9 hours, and they're actually feeling guilty about leaving. And also at the moment, touch wood, numbers are pretty good, fairly benign season at the moment. I say that with everything crossed, but it's it's still people going that, I'm having a break, I'm having a weekend. I'm thinking, you're having a weekend, that's just what we should be doing. So it's about how do we sort of move this more into sort of normalcy, So anyway, but for me, and I like it again what Georgeina said earlier, it's about sort of first things is actually identifying where things are not starting to go quite right for you. But as you said, it's what you've got to put in the bank. For me, it's probably always been more physical. I just want to go and sweat for 40 minutes, do some cardio. But that's been my problem because I'm getting old now, my joints and everything. So my running days on the road are well and truly over and done with. So I was in the gym, but with COVID and particularly in Victoria with our lockdown, all the gyms were shut. So then I took to running up and down the stairs in the building, and then I was getting a sore ankle and all these sort of things. So that actually really did impact on me, the fact that I actually couldn't do what I would normally do. So the other bit that goes with that, and I found myself, I guess maybe like a lot of people, I go to bed and the last thing I'll be checking, what are the latest online stories, a few emails, and I had to be disciplined and go, no, I'm not doing that. I'm reading a book. It's the same old story. I might only read half a page, but I just needed to break that cycle, and that's worked really, really well for me. Gyms are open again, so I'm sort of back into it. So I'm feeling okay.
But it's also setting those boundaries, right? So being able to say, I'm checking emails, but I'm not on it for the next hour, because that responsibility of I need to take care of people, and whether it's I have staff or whether it's a community I'm worried about, or whether it's a bushfire that's still burning, there's always something. So it's that priority of, if I'm going to give my best, I have to care for myself to be able to do that.
And I'm also, pre-COVID when the gyms, were open, and even now in the last couple of weeks, I don't, if I get a break in my day, if I get a meeting cancelled and I can nick into the gym, for 40 minutes, I'll do, and I don't make a secret of it. I like to think that I want others to be doing exactly the same thing. We know, it's always about getting the job done, but, I have no problems with people. If they want to go out for a walk, go out, do what you need to do, because that me time, that alone time that Georgeina spoke about is so important. That's what I talk about. That's my time.
And I love that you're sort of saying it's adjusting. So like you say, whether it's an injury that we've got, or whether it is we're unfortunately aging and our body won't do what we want to do, we have to adjust what we're doing to make it work through, right? We have to be able to keep adapting to take care of ourselves. If we don't do that, then we're going to end up with a bigger problem, because those small things from what you're sharing that just were niggling away became mountains. They became that full overflowing bucket that becomes a bigger thing to manage. There's a great question that's come through that I just want to bring in, because it's really relevant to some of the things you're saying there, Andrew, particularly about that being visible in taking care of yourself and being visible in having those conversations that both of you are sharing you're doing. And the question was, well, how can the, suck it up and get on with it culture that some units or some cultures or some communities feel? How can we change that culture? What's the first step? Andrew, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, look, we've just got to keep working at it. I guess I was very fortunate in Victoria Police when Graham Ashton made the decision 2017 that he wasn't travelling well, so he needed to take some extra time off. And, as you'd imagine, that sent such a strong message throughout the whole organisation. There was nothing wrong with putting up your hand, and you didn't have to suck it up. You could actually take some time off. It was good enough for the Chief Commissioner. It's good enough for anyone else. So it is being visible. It is talking about it. It is giving people the authority, empowering them that that's exactly what they can do. I think we've come a long way, but there's no denying we've got a long way to go. I sort of think back, the last 12 months and my time at the end with Victoria Police, where that was Burke Street and some other incidents, and I think some of this is generational. I remember in particular the first Burke Street and going down to the scene and talking to coppers down on the street, and the young coppers were in tears, and I'd be saying, how are you going? What can I put my arm around them? I talked to the more senior police. I go, there was no tears. How are you going? I'm all right, boss. So, I'd suggest that, we're doing some good things with the younger generation, but I think it's not just us. I think it's what they're bringing into the organisation, but we've still got to keep chipping away at that old, I guess some old crusties that are just, they just want to tough their way through this.
Yeah, and that's almost the elephant in the room, isn't it? And both of you have got different experiences, and even if we call it from a gender perspective, that male modeling of, particularly in your world, it is suck it up and it's don't show anything, and you push through and you don't reach out and you don't show that vulnerability, and it's not working. Very, very clearly it's not working. But equally for you, Georgeina, I'm sure that on your journey through different roles and certainly into leadership, there would have been challenges around what does that image look like for a fairly new female leadership model that's coming into a number of different agencies?
Oh, absolutely right. I recall, I've got 4 children, very blessed. And I recall after my first child, like not even taking my 12 weeks maternity leave because I was too worried the impact that would have, because I'd be seen to, not be carrying my weight, so to speak. And I look at now, and we have active conversations here in this agency about when our partner's taking parental leave and trying to set those examples and encouraging people to have a conversation around it's okay to take that time off. And I use parental leave deliberately because as first responders, it is just as important that we have, a healthy and happy home life and family life as equal as we're trying to have a nice balanced work life. And contributing to your partner in the early days of having a child is just as important, because we're going to be leaning on those partners for 20, 30, 40-year careers. I recall my children, when I left the army and moved into the state emergency service, and a couple of friends came over for dinner and said to my 4 kids, "Oh, how do you feel now that mum's no longer in the army?" And my eldest daughter said, "You know what, the most important thing is she's now present." And they meant that in that I was not only spending time at home or more time at home, but when I was at home, I was present of mind and of body. And so I was enjoying my family life, and that actually does make you a much better person and a more capable person than in your work life. So we do things around here, particularly the leadership team, is I walk the floor every Friday afternoon and I say to people, what are you still doing here? What are you still doing here? Go home. We try and get out to our stations and our sheds as often as we can, just to have conversations with people, and reinforcing that work-life balance is not a throwaway line. It's absolutely necessary, because for a good 3 or 4 months of the year, we're in pretty heavy storm and bushfire season here in the ACT, as it is everywhere else. And so you're going to have these ups and downs. And so when you can have the downtime, we try and kick people out of the room. As I joke with people, we've got 6 different duty officer systems here in our agency because we're a multidisciplined agency. And I said, so if I'm paying that much overtime for 6 duty officers, then the rest of you can go home and have a break. But quite often we feel that, the agency can't do without us, or we need to be seen. I've actively encouraged, during COVID, when we were sent home, nobody felt guilty about working from home. right? Because it was doing the right thing by the community. Stay home, help stop the spread. I've now said to staff, and we can't do it with all of our frontline first responders, but I have said where there is an opportunity for flexible work arrangements, let's try to continue to put those in place, because I've actually found that as an agency, where we have been able to be flexible, we're actually being far more productive. And so whilst we can't do that for our first responders who are out there in fire trucks or in ambulances, I've said, well, let's look at smarter ways in which we can offer flexibility in other arenas for those members of our community. But I think we have to be really deliberate about it, because, we do. We beat ourselves up over what I think from a generational perspective, we work so hard to achieve. Now that we've got it, let's not throw it all away.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we do give permission. So through COVID and all of that, there was this permission. But I actually found a lot of people when they were working from home, whether they weren't used to working from home or whether they felt they needed to do more. And so it created these blurred lines. So there was actually a perfect opportunity to see how productive you can be in those different settings. But having the permission, and then what you're saying about empowering people on a Friday to go, you're not needed. You take care of you. You go and see your family. Those parenting moments are golden, aren't they? Where you sit there and you almost kick yourself, but you're proud at the same time, where you go, yeah, you're right. I am present finally. That is, and it is, I think it's a really relevant comment, because when we look at all the research and the data around wellbeing, it's being present in your life. It's being present in that space you're in, to be accepting of what's there, and then to be able to take control and do something with it. And I think often we forget that. We forget we have to go, oh yeah, this is not working. This is not happening, or this is too much, or whatever it might be. You've both sort of touched on it and talked a little bit about resilience. And I get a bit frustrated by buzzwords. I think wellbeing is something that we as an organisation are constantly butting our heads against. Wellbeing does not equal hot yoga or just food. It's a whole heap of different things. And resilience is a similar thing. People see resilience in any way, shape or form. What do you think resilience is? Is it wellbeing or is it something else? And why is resilience relevant to first responders and that broad community we're talking to? Andrew, do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, look, I'm sure Georgeina is going to give a much better answer around this, but I must admit, when I've been thinking about this, and I'm not sure how you differentiate them. So if my day-to-day well-being is good, then if I'm going to go as a first responder to an incident, my ability to bounce back, my resilience will be stronger. So I guess that's a very simple way that I sort of explain it. So, they are, in my mind, they're somewhat different, but, they're somewhat dependent upon each other at the same time.
It was me for you, Andrew. What about you, Georgeina?
Look, I would have to agree with Andrew. I see resilience as a critical component of my wellbeing, and but I also know that my wellbeing and being well allows me to build my resilience and put things in the bank. And so they're slightly different, but they're both a variation on the theme. And the theme is that I'm a first responder and I'm able to get out of bed. I'm able to have a smile on my face, get to work, do a good day's work for a good day's pay, and go home again. But I can't do one without the other. Now, it's a bit like the chicken before the egg. Clearly, of my generation, it was well-being was an automatic issue for you, supposedly, as part of, just as you got uniforms and boots, you got a bit of well-being. And we didn't worry about what ensured you maintained that. Now we do understand just the importance of our ability to bounce back, our ability to be discerning. I used to say to a number of my soldiers, you can't unsee things. So be careful what you look for, because you will see it. We're now realising that is very important, that we understand we don't need to chase trauma. We're going to be exposed to it and experience it enough in our lifetimes. And so there's no need to constantly be putting yourself out there. It's about taking turns, allowing others to be first, and you can be second or third on occasion. I think it's about understanding when it's okay to be vulnerable, either to, as I said, be able to receive help, as Andrew said, able to seek it out. So I think it's really, really important. And without resilience, we won't have a balanced and well career, and we won't have a balanced and well life cycle.
And you touch on such an important point, and you've both mentioned this, that you actually don't have to seek things out. The difference for first responders and all of those involved in anything around that space is it finds you, and it will continually find you, and it will do so over the course of your career. So thinking about you guys in certainly different aspects of your career from when you first joined, because you have been involved in the area for a long time, what do you think is the difference for first responders? What is it that you need to be more aware of? So that we've had a number of great comments from family members that have messaged through about how important this is for them to have for their son or their daughter and things like that. What's the difference in protecting or preparing to protect your well-being for first responders? Georgeina, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I think the risk in our roles has always been there. However, I think we feel that the expectations of the community and the sense is that we have this no fault environment that we all work in. And whether it's a no fault environment from, the commissioner out there on the news with their ministers, right down to our most junior individual who may just make a mistake. We're actually all human beings. None of us are superhuman. However, I think society in general has this massive expectation that there won't be any fault. And if there is, society also has an expectation that it's able to blame someone. Someone somewhere must have done something wrong. And so there's this constant punitive type behaviour that we are exposed to as first responders as well. Now, I don't want to overplay that, but we find it the same in schools. Let's look at the society we live in. From the day you go to school, every child gets a trophy now. Every child's a winner. So we're actually setting the preconditions that everything is fine, everything is good, nothing will go wrong. And then we go out there into the real world, whether it's the recipient of a capability a first responder will provide, or as a first responder, your sense of obligation and community expectation. So we have found ourselves as imperfect human beings in an imperfect world, but an expectation that everything will be all right. And it's really it is really tough. And I think that's probably for me what I have found over the last couple of years is the greatest challenge I'm in awe of what our first responders do, like volunteers and paid staff and the families who make such sacrifice. And I'm a tree hugging person. I just love people in general, and I'm a very proud and protective mama bear over all of our people as well. And I just feel that sometimes the world's a little bit tough on us when it could be a little bit nicer. And I think that wears us down as a community of professionals, and it wears our families down as well.
And I think it's such a good comment, and it does link with a brilliant question we've had from one of the audience members of, that hero culture Australia has for its first responders, and that the weight that comes with that hero.
Yeah.
What is that taking on too much responsibility, carrying that weight yourself, thinking you should be pushing through and doing more because you are now the hero. And we certainly saw that during COVID, right? And it was literally the words people used. They're our heroes. And by all means, definitely doing incredible things. But gee, that's a weight to carry, right?
It is. It's tough, I think. So, and I'm sitting behind a desk watching them all, you know what I mean? So,
but as you say, caring for, right? So all of those people who are behind a desk are equally involved in what's happening on the front line. And that's the same for our families or friends who are hearing it second, third, fourth case. They're still carrying that same weight, but in some ways with even less equipment of what I do with this to process it. Andrew, what do you think about that hero culture and that piece?
Yeah, that was some great comments and good conversation. So a couple of things really were highlights to me that, and this hero piece is real. We see it. We talk about it. I guess more senior people in our organisations about when we do have emergencies. We see that cycle in the media. So it is about the hero first, and then you get the human interest story. Then it's about who do we blame, and we see it every time. And we always think about, well, how can we intervene in that to protect our people? Because, I'm like Georgeina. I'll never knock back an invitation to, Marine Search and Rescue, SES, Fireys, or whatever else. It's become well and truly, I had a great family in Victoria, but I've now got this much, much greater family. And I feel for people when the media will go down that particular path and undermining the great work that they're doing. If I can just go back to the family side of things, and this is so important. I remember I was at a police graduation with Graham Ashton, and a mother came up to Graham and said, what are you going to do to keep my son safe? And I guess it's a simple question, but such a powerful question. I guess I'd never really thought of it in that way. We think about putting people through their training, and the relatively easy part is, is the training. It's the operational safety and tactics. You give them, all these tools of the trade, but it's about what do you give them in terms of their mental health and well-being, and some of the tools that we're actually talking about now. Because Georgeina, and you've touched on it, it's this blame. We can't help but blame ourselves, and we do get it wrong. And I guess just a little story. As a sergeant, I was a police negotiator, and I got called out one night to negotiate with this guy in a car. And every so often he would put a rifle under his chin and say, unless you get it was his wife, get my wife here, I'll count to 10, I'll shoot myself. And so I talked him through a few of those, but at the end he shot himself in front of me. He was roughly the same age as me. I had 2 young daughters at that stage. He had 2 young children, and so I learned a lot out of that particular incident. So one of those was I blamed myself for a long time in relation to what more could I have done. Could I have said something differently? Like there was a police psych with me, and they were saying I did a good job, but again at times things don't go to plan, and things can go wrong, and again you need that support around you, that you've done everything possible, you've done everything you can, but as I said, sometimes things go wrong. I remember on that same day, I got called into my chief superintendent's office, and who's a senior officer I had a lot of respect for, and I still do. He's now a veteran, of course. But when I sat down with him, I sort of thought maybe he was going to ask, how am I going? The first thing he said to me was, what do you think you could have said any differently? And I'll never forget it, because he was known for being a bit of a straight shooter, but it was nothing around my welfare. And I guess what I took out of that is, if I'm ever in the position of that particular senior officer, or when I have that opportunity, I will always be asking that question. How are you? What can I do for you? Yeah. I guess the other thing where I learned some of my early coping mechanisms was when I finished that particular meeting, I went for a run, and I just had to get it out of my head. But to show that I'm not. There is another side to me. I love ice cream, so I had some ice cream later in the day to sort of balance that out.
Good. We like the balance, which leads us to a very good comment. And I think that those moments where you're looking as a leader, a growing leader as well, to go, wow, you just missed an opportunity, right? We're getting better, but you've missed an opportunity of what's really meaningful. And this question that's come through, a statement and then a question of, having been a police officer for 28 years, I can attest that things have changed significantly, which is wonderful to hear, right? This is what we want to hear. So thank you to the person who shared. However, do you think, and maybe Andrew, I'm going to ask this to you, do you think it's possible to have work-life balance when you have to fill a roster to make sure first responders are actually available? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, look, I do think it is possible. Georgeina touched on it, and it is very, very difficult with your front line, your first responders, to provide the flexibility that you can in other roles. But I think as long as people are looking at rosters, are ensuring that people get a couple of days off together. It's not just one day, then work and then one day off. So rostering is so important in terms of how you can actually do that. And again, in our emergency services, quite rightly so, people have good recreation leave entitlements. So it's about, again, making sure that the leave is taken at the right time and people given the opportunity in terms of their family requirements to get the leave when they want to get the leave. Sometimes that's difficult and you've got to be flexible around that. But in some respects, you're only working, 8 hours a day, or you could be on 10-hour shifts. If I know that's different for some of the emergency services, but it's about sort of the discipline about when you've finished your day's work. It's then about where you need to focus your efforts and your energy, whether that's in relation to the me time or your family time.
Brilliant comments. And it's not perfect, but we're working towards, right? And that's those pieces we're looking at. So very conscious we don't have a lot of time. We've got about 10 minutes. We've got excellent questions. And I do want to ask another question that's come from the audience before I ask you guys for your key themes. And maybe Georgeina, because you mentioned about being present, and that was something that was really relevant to you. So the question was, how do partners of first responders encourage their partners to be more present at home and to not feel guilty to take time out for themselves and get support when it's needed? And this is a great question because it's coming from so many people, really. It seems so hard for the helpers to ask for help. And that's the truth. That's really well said. And, it's very hard for the partners to continually carry that weight of support when they may not have the tools or the knowledge or all that they require to do it well. So how can we, as partners of first responders, help our partner be more present?
Look, it's a great question. And there are so many similarities between what we're talking about now in the emergency services community as what I experienced in defence. Initially, we were very focused on the partners, on the individuals themselves. Then we realised there's a whole really important part of the equation here, which is the families. And it was a very similar theme in defence, the families feeling quite isolated, not knowing where they could go, or being too shy to tap into the resources that are available. And so, not that I'm plugging any one particular service provider, but Andrew and I are both on the advisory board for Fortum Australia, which is a good example of an organisation that when they put out those ads to say they're here to support families and partners, they really are. And so I would encourage members of our community, family members of our community, that if you can tap into those resources, just as we encourage a first responder to seek support and assistance, I would say exactly the same thing to family members, because there are a whole bunch of people out there who want to help, genuinely want to help. I think that the second one is it's really hard to have those kind of honest, tough conversations with our partners. But I've got to tell you, once you break the ice, you can usually then establish some free-flowing conversations. And it is an art as well as a bit of a science as to how do you broach those subjects. But can I say to family members, don't give up. We are tough nuts to crack. We really are. We're hard people to live with. But if you can scratch away at the surface, you'll actually find in there that person that you fell in love with, that parent that you want to be connected with. We actually need you to keep trying and not give up on us. So, but honesty is really, really important. But can I also say timing is crucial. You do have to pick your moments for when you can sort of cultivate or curate that tough conversation. And that's not easy to find. Look, I wish I had a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's going to be very different for all of us. But if it's the one thing I can say is there are a lot of resources out there that you can tap into that will help you better navigate what is a very delicate ecosystem that we all live in.
And it is, I think timing is such a good comment in there, because usually when things happen, it's in the heat of the moment, and that's when we're least likely to get the outcome we actually want. But unfortunately, that's what happens, right? It's all when things stick off that we go in. So sometimes being aware, okay, not the right time, but I'm going to try again. Wonderful you mentioned Fortum, because we're actually have them presenting later on in the week as well. And I think finding those support networks that work for you and speak your language is key. Very conscious of the time that is racing away from us. So just in terms of last question to each of you, one of the things that I think for me, what I've taken away most from this discussion is your vulnerability. And I thank you, because I really feel to change things in a question that I'm not going to get to ask in a lot of detail, but please have it in mind as you answer. My question is, as leaders, how do we change that culture and change that the value set that we're actually leading? And I think your involvement and representation and honesty here has been gold, because I think the more we speak, the more people realize that we actually have been at different points in our career, and none of us are the heroes that are, you know, untouchable. We're all human. We're actually all human, and we make mistakes, and we do our best, and things work when things don't work, but we do what we can. So if you were speaking to someone who has listened in today, or has a family member that's feeling like you're feeling, that's a 6 or below out of 10, what would be your top tip? What would you be recommending to them as this is where to start? Andrew, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Look, yeah, I think if someone's at that particular point, the thing they've got to do is put up their hand and just be honest with themselves and be honest with the people around them that they're struggling and that they need some help. And that can be, you know, it could be the conversation with the family, you know, that might work, or it could be with a colleague, it could be with a friend, or it could be with a counsellor, you know, or some psychological support. But I think the first thing is you've just got to be honest to yourself, and honest, as I said, with the people around you, that you need to do something about it. There's no shame in that whatsoever.
That call to action, I guess, that first seeing it and then actually making sure you're doing something with. Georgeina?
Look, two things. First one is to echo Andrew's comments. You know, put your hand up. You know, you can be at a crossroads. Whether you turn left or turn right, make sure whichever way you turn is to do something to help yourself or seek help. But I can also say there's a lot of it comes down to leadership. And it's not just about promoting what we all do well, it's understanding when as leaders we may not get it right as well. I didn't get it right last year. I had a blip on my radar that could have turned into a big black hole, and I could have fallen into it. But I did recognise as a leader last year there was a period where I wasn't my best self. And I had made some mistakes, and those mistakes could have led to, you know, people having a no-fault culture and a blame. And when I recognised that that was my default reaction to being under a lot of pressure, I had to take a step back. I had to have a good chat to myself and say, hey, you don't always get it right, Georgeina. You could be contributing to the environment that you're also suffering from. So being mindful as a leader that sometimes we've got to have our own checks and balances. And I say that as it relates to the culture of the environment that we're in as well. It is as equally as important as it is to create the environment where our people can put their hand up and seek support and help if they need it.
Totally agree. And I think that question that was posed about how do leaders do it, I think that's exactly, it is the first step, but us continuing on the path we're on, but improving it to really see those moments, to share those moments and to do something with them, just as you two have kindly done tonight. So thank you so much, Georgeina. Thank you, Andrew. It's been an amazing conversation. I'm sure we could talk for another 3 hours, but I do want to thank you for your involvement, but for your sharing above everything, because there's been overwhelming feedback throughout the session in the chat of people feeling that actually really is their world as well. And that's what our goal is out of this summit. So if anyone is feeling like they need extra help or they are feeling very vulnerable, we are going to share links of where you can actually seek some help. So please do take that opportunity, and we will share that through for you any second now. When we finish this session, everyone will get the opportunity for a very brief survey. It's literally 2 or 3 questions that give us a guide as to whether we've delivered for you, but also those areas of importance to you. So what is important to you as attendees? What do you want to hear more about? And so if you can take the opportunity to just take the brief survey to share with us, that would be absolutely brilliant, because then we can continue to give back to you. The survey itself is completely anonymous. There's an option to enter your name, but by no means feel you must. It's absolutely fine. And once this session closes, it will pop up straight for you. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening, and please feel free to continue to join us for the upcoming activities in the next few days, where we will continue this critical conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.